You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
I just didn't want to stay where I was. People said to me, well, do you have a job lined up in New York? I said, no. Do you know anybody there? No. Do you have a place to live? No. I said, well, aren't you afraid of what'll happen if you move? I said, no, I'm afraid of what'll happen if I stay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Was It Chance, the podcast about embracing opportunity and taking intentional risk for your creative life. I'm Heather Vickery.
And I'm Alan Seals. And Heather and I started off as two perfect strangers who met by chance in a totally normal way and embraced opportunity. Listen in as we chat with other successful people about the risks they've taken to put themselves on a path to creative success.
Did you have like a voice crack there? Like a preteen voice crack? Is that what I heard?
Maybe. I don't know. Sometimes it happens.
It does.
Listen,
Alan, who's with us today?
We have old J-Mads, my old buddy J-Mads. Jeffery Madoff.
Madoff.
Oh, Madoff. I'll do that again.
Made off with the money.
No, don't do it again. Keep it, because that's amazing.
Okay. Then Jeffery Madoff. I am not mad that Jeffery is here. Jeff is a fashion designer, teacher, author, playwright, and producer who helps dispel the myth that artists can't be good business people and that good business people can't be creative. Jeff has directed award-winning commercials, documentaries, and web content for clients such as Ralph Lauren, Victoria's Secret, Tiffany, Radio City, the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, otherwise known as AMDA, and Harvard University, just to name a few. He's also the writer and producer of Personality, a play based on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame artist Lloyd Price that just opened in Chicago this month.
Chicago.
June. Hey, that's you. That's where you are.
Where I am.
Yeah.
Oh, you're in
Jeff.
Chicago?
I am. I want to go see the show.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Jeff.
Hi. Thank you for having
Jeff?
me on.
J-Mads?
Jeff is not sure what to do with me and Alan just yet. He's like, what did my press people get me into?
I am completely comfortable because I can't fuck up any more than Alan already did. So
I think I love you.
Call you by the wrong name, flub the intro.
Yeah, but you set such a low bar that I can hopefully
That's
exceed
what I
it.
always say. I'm like, the bar is low. Don't worry about anything.
And the bar is open also, even though...
And the bar is open. I love that.
This is an open bar, and drink all you want of the intellectual Kool-Aid. So, Jeff, I want to know, out of all the things that, I just rattled off pretty poorly, where did you start? Like, when you were little Jeff, what was the first thing you did? Were you interested in fashion design or teaching or writing? Where did it all begin?
Well, really, if you want to go back to the beginning, it began at birth. And, prior to that, not a lot was going on, at least nothing that I remember. My earliest memories of being inside my mom, it was comfortable. There was plenty to eat. I had enough space.
There was plenty to eat.
Yeah. Oh man, being a fetus was great. The buffet was incredible.
And there was no competition. And so, it was really nice. It was like having a really wonderful, self-sufficient studio apartment. And
which costs a lot of money in New York these days.
That's right. That's right. And although I wasn't charged rent, I was evicted quite suddenly after 9 months or so. And so that was kind of a traumatic shock to the system.
You should write a play about that.
Maybe I will. It depends how this one goes, but I've been thinking of that. But did I have any master plan that was hatched at birth?
Well, what was the first opportunity that came along in your life? It was it middle school? Was it high school? Were you like, I love fashion, or I'm going to write a play, or I like watching TV, I want to get into producing or being even an actor?
And Jeff, you started off with a philosophy and psychology degree.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
Which would have been what I would have done if I have a degree in English, but if I'd gone for...
And you speak it very well, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I've been working on it for 48
Who
years.
says English degrees are useless?
I love my English and theater. I joke that I have a degree in bullshit. Like I can bullshit my way through anything with my creative writing and theater degree. No, but yeah, I mean, you are super multi-passionate. Again, philosophy and psychology, and then fashion design and production and writing and teaching. And so I'm with Alan. Like, what was the first sort of aha opportunity that you were like, oh, let me just give that a try? Or did you already know that you wanted to go in to what you started off with, philosophy and psychology?
I had started off, I was thinking of majoring in conversational Latin. And then when I heard that it was...
Is that serious or sarcasm? Is it satire?
Well, I'll let
tell
you
me it's
decide.
It's totally satire.
You give such
It's
great
totally
delivery
satire.
that I'm like, and I'm looking at this man in the face, in the eyes, listeners, and I'm like, damn, it's very straight delivery. It's good. It's good.
That's how I used to work at UPS. And so we were known for our delivery. And
this is Alan in a few years. You are an older version of Alan. I don't know how I got myself into this.
Well, he is way more handsome, so I have something to look forward to.
Trying to win it back after the Madoff comment. Is that it, Alan? I can see your motives are clear. You were correct, Heather. It was philosophy and psychology. I wanted to have two majors that would assure a complete inability to get a job. And I was successful in doing that. I thought with philosophy, I could somehow assemble a flock and shepherd my way through life, but that didn't happen. And I had no plans, honestly, of what I was going to do. All I knew is that, I'm seduced by ideas, and if I really am fascinated by something, that's what I will go after. And, I started off in fashion design, not because I had any passion at all for fashion design, but because I was working in this boutique, a little boutique in Madison, Wisconsin, which is where I went to college, University of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And a dear friend of mine who was a year older called me up and said, look, I've saved up some money. Can you think of a gig that would earn more than bank interest? And I said, well, I work in this boutique. I see what we sell. And I could start a fashion company. And,
just like that.
And
just like
I
that.
mean, truly,
like, why not?
Truly just like that. I could always draw. And so I didn't know what else, nothing else came to mind. I always wondered, because it was so, situational. He called me and I was at work. And, I was thinking, God, what if I had been in the bathroom? And I said, I could make paper towels and toilet paper. I don't know. It's just, I looked around where I was when I got the call and made up an answer. So I did have experience selling the clothes because I worked in this boutique. And by the way, it's funny, when I call it a boutique, it sounds like it's some kind of established business. The owner was only a few years older than I. And, we sold rolling papers and hash pipes at the checkout counter. So it's not, it was not like, oh, well, this is a sophisticated business. You learned a great deal of business at that time. And the answer is no, I didn't. But it, exposed me to New York, because I went in, I was the buyer for the store because nobody else knew how to do it. And my parents were in retail. And so I had worked at their store when I was a little kid, just, receiving merchandise and checking it off of the packing lists and the invoicing and all that sort of thing. So I had some knowledge of the business, which was more than anybody else who was working there had, which could talk about low bars, by the way. So that's how I started in fashion design. And it happened, I designed some things. got some sewers who did alterations for us to make them, and they sold right away. And so made some more, and they sold right away. And then I packed a bunch of samples onto the back of my motorcycle, actually drove to Chicago from Madison, and went to like 18 boutiques and sold, I think, 14 of them. And all of a sudden, I was in business. I had orders to fulfill, and that was my first company. And I was chosen one of the top 10 young designers in the United States, which is a lot less impressive than it sounds, because I think there were only 8 of us. So being in the top 10 was not a big deal.
Everyone else was super old.
Yeah.
Everyone's super old.
Yeah. It was just this whole geriatric scene at that point. That's right.
But where did you start working or why did you start working at the boutique? Was that just a day job to like pay the bills, and then you just fell into everything else?
It was just a job. It was 2 things. Yes, it was a way to make some money and pay the bills and so on. Plus, across the hall from us, we were in the base of this rooming house, which was actually pretty interesting, because the wall behind the checkout counter, is where we had the shelves that had the stereo and the records and stuff on it. And above us was a rooming house, kind of a low-end rooming house. So when somebody OD'd and fell down the stairs, the arm would skip across the record. And we said, oh, there goes another one. And
Wow.
Oh, that's horrible.
and across the hall from us, the other half of the bottom of the rooming house was a record store. So, I had friends that worked in there, so I could I was making mixtapes long before there were mixtapes, because I could take any records I wanted and record them and then return them. And I've always loved music. So it was actually a great place. Plus, I was young. I was, had just finished college, and it was a great social atmosphere too, because all the customers were my age, and so that was fun also. So it was a neat experience. It was a lot of fun, but it's nothing I had any, no pun intended, designs on. That's not what I thought I was going to be doing, but that's what I ended up doing for my first business, my first adult business, which makes it sound like porn, I was
going to say. But then your second adult business, we skip over that. But the fashion side, it sounds like it was going well, and you're in demand, and you've got the orders. And I love that it's just situational, and you're like, I'm here, let's just make fashion. Whereas if you're on the toilet, you'd be a politician, because you'd say you're full of shit, or not anymore.
No, on the toilet, you're getting rid of some of that though too. So
right there you go. So the commercials, the documentaries, the web content. Obviously, the internet wasn't a thing back in the record player days. But at what point were you like, time for this adult business to go away, or maybe it's still there? I don't know. But what was the next thing where somebody called you up and you're like, well, I'm here in watching TV. I guess I'll make commercials now.
Yeah, right? How did we transition here?
Well, what happened was, I had mentioned that I went to New York because I did the buying trips for the store. And that was a time when it was really a unique process. It was a new market, which was called the contemporary market for fashion, which was for people my age at that point. Because usually prior to that contemporary market creation, you either look like you were in elementary school or selling insurance. And then all of a sudden fashion started to shift and got more interesting in catering to those people who were just out of college or in college. And there was a whole cultural shift. And we also became a meaningful marketplace. I was a baby boomer. And as we got older, that was also the biggest marketplace. So it was appealing to people that I was the same age as. So it was kind of an interesting time to look at our popular culture. Not that I did it as in the intellectual pursuit, but in looking back, I started seeing certain kinds of patterns, which is how we all kind of make sense of the trajectory of our lives. It's through the rear view mirror. You don't really know going through, and then you somehow put it together as if it made sense and was meant to be, but it's not meant to be. Who the fuck knows? Shit happens. And, your life goes on. And I had a backer, a really good man who was my financial backer, and he owned 5 banks in Wisconsin. And he found me to be an interesting novelty. I actually knew his daughter, and she said, "Oh, you should meet my dad," because I needed financing. What my friend sent me to start the business, memory's a little hazy now. He thinks it was $2,500. I thought it was $1,500, but whatever it was, it went really quick. But, at the time, that was the most money I ever had at one time to do whatever I wanted with. So I had to get financial backing because my business was growing really, really fast. And she said, you ought to meet my dad. I told him about you and thought that your business was quite interesting. And, I was like 21 or 22, and I had 110 people working for me.
Wow.
So
in your fashion design business?
Yes.
Wow.
And so, he, being a banker,
they're all mannequins, though.
They weren't dummies. And and he, thought that, thank you very much, Heather, I appreciate that.
You two are literally the same person. I just am amazed.
What came to pass was that initially I loved, going to New York. I was intimidated by it at first. So I liked going and visiting, but never thought of living there. But after a couple of years, I realized that I was a stimulus junkie, that I loved being in New York. Being in a college town like Madison, which was fabulous, made me realize that I really love cities. I love downtown, suburbs, which is what I grew up in, and had my upbringing was fun. It was great. And I still have many, many friends from my childhood. But I didn't want to mow a lawn. I didn't want to clean out the spouting. I didn't want to have to do any of that stuff. And I was very attracted to cities, I realized. And I wanted to move to New York. And my financial backer had made it clear that one of the reasons he was backing me is because I was employing Wisconsinites and they banked at his bank. And so when I said I wanted to move, he said, I had told you that I would not back you if you moved the business. And he had told me that. It wasn't anything that was vindictive or mean. He was great. He was a really good man and he backed my business. But it was time for me to move on. And there was a recession going on at that point. I just didn't want to stay where I was. And, people said to me, well, do you have a job lined up in New York? I said, no. Do you know anybody there? No. Do you have a place to live? No. I said, well, aren't you afraid of what'll happen if you move? I said, no, I'm afraid of what'll happen if I stay. It was sort of time to move on from the college town, which I really loved, and move on to whatever the next chapter was going to be. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I moved to New York. And I actually traveled. I had saved up enough money that if I lived frugally, which I did, that I could travel for about a year, which I went to Europe and traveled around. And when I came back to New York, and I lived 11 different places the first year, testing out different neighborhoods, house sitting, doing whatever I could to just keep costs down also. I ran out of money. Is the bottom line.
Eventually, yeah.
But I had a good name in the fashion business because, I got good publicity, my stuff sold. I started another fashion company, sold it, and that led to me transitioning into the film business.
Wait, what?
Well, yeah, and
yeah, that's a connection I don't understand.
Before we get there, I'm just curious, your fashion business in Wisconsin, did you just close it? Where you're like,
yes,
sorry, fellas, I'm out. Like, good luck.
Yeah, I did. I discussed it with my backer, and he had made clear what his intention was because of the economic situation at that time. It was also stores that I was selling to, like Bloomingdale's, for instance, would take 4 months to pay. cash flow became a real issue. And boy, the business was no longer any fun. I had to lay people
Right.
off. You know, I'm like 22 and very mindful that I'm laying people off that are not only more than twice my age, they were supporting families with what I paid them.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a heavy thing for a kid, which is what I was,
Yeah.
to be shouldering, because I knew these people. They were, you know, they worked in, I had a factory where we were making stuff. I had an office in New York also. But the core of my employees, other than the sales staff, which was in New York and different other major markets like Chicago and San Francisco and so on, you know, I wanted to move on. I wanted to do something else. And the decision to close the business was necessary in terms of me moving. I could have tried to seek other financing to keep it going, but I just also wanted to just have a break and do something else, which is why I traveled for a while. You know, just instead of just keep moving forward, I wanted to pause and kind of get a sense of what the hell is going on in my life, you know. And it was tough. It was a tough period because, you know, I never had to like lay off people before. I never had employees before, and so it was a lot to deal with. And I wanted to, you know, understand what was going on with me. So that's why I made that decision, and the decision to close the business.
So closed it, moved to New York, started traveling, came back, house sitting, ran out of money-ish. And then where did the like getting into TV and film and whatnot at that point too? So where did that opportunity come from, or how did you create that opportunity for yourself?
Well, I started another company. I was approached by somebody from another business that I knew, and she said that, you know, she'd handle the financial end of things, and, you know, I should design, you know, because I had again, my stuff sold. And so that seemed like a good idea. And we did that and built up the company and then sold that company. And again, it sounds like much bigger business than it was. It wasn't.
That was fashion design.
That was
also.
another fashion company, yes.
Okay.
And what facilitated the transition is that there was a company that I bought fabrics from. And now when I started my business, you know, my hair wasn't blonde, but it was like yours, Heather. You know, it was down my shoulders, and it was a, you know, different era. Mm-hmm. And getting taken seriously by the adults in business, you know, didn't happen until they saw that I had a substantial credit line. And, you know,
Yeah.
having money overcomes all kinds of biases, you know, and because, you know, nobody is biased against green. And there was a really nice man who was one of the owners of a fabric company, and he never questioned me. He liked me off the bat. We did business together. And then one time I went in to buy, I had bought from him in my first company, and I was buying from him in this company. And he said, "Jeff, do you know anything about the film business?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, I mean, I love movies. I've read some books, but no, I don't really know much about it." And he said, "Well, you've got a good head for business, and my son is your age, and he's gotten involved with some people, and he won't listen to me, but I think you two might hit it off,
Yep.
and would you mind meeting him?" I said, "No, I'd be happy to."
So one crime spree later, here we are.
Yes, that's right. Well, what happened was his son had bought the rights to a book called Junkie. It was written by William Burroughs. And are you familiar with William Burroughs? Mm-mm. So William Burroughs was one of the seminal figures of the Beat generation, like with Allen Ginsberg and Ken Kesey. And he was a fascinating person. He was one of the heirs to the Burroughs business machine fortune. His father was one of the largest owners of IBM. and he was
That's
gay
something.
and a junkie. And he was at that time in his mid to late 60s, mid 60s probably, or early 60s, I don't know, something like that. A lot older than the rest of us. And he had written Junkie. His most famous book, by the way, was called Naked Lunch. And these are like, really cornerstone books of the Beat generation. And you're nodding your head, Heather. You're familiar with these? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so his son had bought the rights to make a movie out of Junkie, and the person who was going to be directing that was Dennis Hopper. And
Young Dennis.
Dennis Hopper, who had just finished making Apocalypse Now with Francis Ford Coppola directing,
Yeah.
and he was there with Marlon Brando. So Dennis Hopper and I really hit it off. And all of a sudden, I was like involved in this situation that within a few weeks became clear that was not going to come to fruition. But it was still really interesting. It was Dennis Hopper and Terry Southern who wrote Magic Christian, if you ever heard of that. And that was a big deal book in the 70s. And Dennis was an interesting character, and this is before he got cleaned up. So there were times that he was quite out there.
Yeah.
And they had a suite. They moved into a suite at the Chelsea Hotel, which is quite a scene at that time in the 70s. And their day would start at like 4 PM, and Burroughs would give actually Dennis Hopper would sign over his checks. I saw this happening. It's so vivid to me. I can picture it as I'm talking to you. He would sign over the checks from Zoetrope, which was Coppola's film studio, from his payments for Apocalypse Now. And then Burroughs' assistant would go out and score drugs and buy alcohol.
Wow.
And so it was a very interesting time. Tommy, the guy who had bought the rights, the son of the person I mentioned, I said to him, you put this team together, and they're going to squeeze you out. They don't need you anymore. And he said, but I own the property. And I said, well, you optioned it, and it's never going to get made. These guys, wake up at 4 PM, they eat, get high, start arguing at 2 AM, and nothing ever gets done. It's not going to happen. I was going to have a part in the movie because Dennis liked me, and I was going to have a part in a movie, but that movie never happened, and hence the end of my film career. And
in the
But
acting.
you're not going to let that stop you.
And it was what I did learn was, through meeting other people while I was doing this, is I thought, wow, this is interesting, because I've always been into storytelling. When I was a little kid, I was always writing short stories. I even wrote a play that was performed in 6th grade when I was in elementary school, which is kind of funny because it was about a kid that is on a field trip with the school, and he falls asleep, and they all leave, and the museum's closed. When he wakes up, he's in this museum, and he sees, yes, what your reaction is correct. Yes, it was.
I just watched that movie with my daughter last week.
Ben Stiller broke in and stole
you
your
should have
idea?
You should have gotten some coin for that.
I wish, but I don't think anybody outside of King's School in Akron, Ohio, which is where I'm from, ever saw that. But that was, in fact, that was the play. That these iconic historic figures came to life. So it's kind of funny. But anyhow, I drew and wrote comic strips that would get passed around the school. So storytelling was always something I really enjoyed, which I think I got from my grandfather, who we were very close. He died when I was quite young, but we were very close, and he would come over and he would tell me stories. He grew up in New York. And I always, I could have never articulated it as a kid, but now that I'm an adult, realize, just the power of story. And and telling stories is something that I really spark to. And I love reading, and I love great storytelling, be it a book or a film or a play or whatever. And so that became a real magnet for me. So the combination of that, along with, learning some film and then video production, sort of set the course for me for another different career. But I was able to parlay my fashion knowledge and get clients such as Ralph Lauren and Victoria's Secret and some of the people that you mentioned, because I knew their business and I could speak their language and knew what their concerns were. So I think if you're paying attention, everything you do informs everything else you do in life. It's not like you did this, then you did this, then you did this, and there's no connection. There's always connections.
How did you go back to, like, Ralph Lauren, right, a fashion client, and say, now I'm going to do something? Because they're not a small company. They've got a huge company with multiple divisions. So the fashion side that's buying or designing may not have anything to do with the marketing side. Is making commercials. So how did you bridge that gap?
Well, what had happened was that I realized that there was an opportunity in shooting fashion shows. That wasn't being done before. They were shot still photography, so the magazines and press, and, at that time, the fashion press was in newspapers, it was quite substantial. And so there were always a lot of photographers at the end of the runway and along the sides of the runway. But the shows weren't being shot in moving pictures. And my first client was Halston. And, the way that I got him, I actually called up and was able to get him on the phone.
Wow.
And so I told him what I was doing. And I said, you never see your own fashion show. You're backstage prepping the models. All you see is stills, and all the people that work for you are afraid to tell you the truth about, how people were responding. They'll all say it was great, it was lovely, everybody was enthusiastic. Wouldn't you love to see your own show? And he said, I would. Could you come in and talk? And I did, and got him as an account. And at that time, he was the highest profile fashion account, because I believe you can always start at the top and work your way down. It's a lot harder to work your way up. And you never know until you try. So there's no reason not to shoot high. I think a lot of people are really reluctant to do that because they think that they don't have a chance.
And Dennis Hopper followed that advice too. He shot high all the time.
He got high all the time. That's right. And so I think it was an interesting, again, looking back, life lesson, because I believe that you shouldn't say no to yourself. If it's something that you're passionate about, that you really want to do, try to figure out a way to do it. But I think that's really important, because there's enough people that are going to say no to you, that are going to say, what do you, if you're going to be a dentist or an accountant or a lawyer or something, nobody says to you, well, what's your fallback position? But if you're going to make films or write or be a dancer or a musician or a painter, it's always, well, but what's your fallback position? Mm-hmm. So I think your best fallback position is falling back on your own savvy and ability, and to learn how to sort of navigate those things so you can, if you want a creative career, that you can fulfill on that. And because it is also a business. And so you have to be able to survive business-wise in order to keep any of those things going.
Where did that, I hate the word grit, right? It's used a lot, but like that's a determination, a grit, I guess a sense of self-awareness, or maybe ignorance? I don't know, but there's
just
a point. Guts? Yeah. There's a point when you're like, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it because I don't know how hard it is. I mean, obviously you're not saying that.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, when you're a kid, you don't know, and you aren't as aware of risk, nor at that time, I wasn't married, I didn't have kids. And so, any risks that I took affected only me in a certain way. I mean, of course, it affected the people that I worked with and so on, but it's different. It was a different stage of life. And I think that ignorance, which I've had to channel even as an older adult, in terms of doing the play that I'm doing, because I wanted to channel my younger self in terms of just not being, I'm a lot more aware of all of the obstacles along the way, but I tend to focus on what my goal is as opposed to the obstacles in the way. Because if you focus on your goal and you hit an obstacle, if you keep that goal in mind, you'll figure out some way around it. And what you were calling grit was my parents. My mom and dad were entrepreneurs. I mentioned they had the retail business. And, being an entrepreneur is tough. There's all this mythology about, oh yeah, you create your own hours, you're just working for yourself, and that's all horseshit. It's hard. And that journey is a very bumpy road. And, 94, 95% of all startups fail within 5 years. Mm-hmm. So, if you look at the odds and you try to assess the risk, it seems insurmountable. I'm smart enough to know what I don't know. And that's really a big plus, because then you find the best people that can complement your talents and help you move forward. And I think that's really, really critical. But perseverance is huge, and that's the often overlooked ingredient, as people think there's some magic formula or recipe towards success, and there's not. You just got to keep the fuck at it, because it's hard and most people give up.
Yeah, are you familiar with Angela Duckworth's work? She's got a book out called Grit.
Yes, I know that much.
What science has, you're right, and we kind of know that, but there's science behind that. Like, resilience and grit will get you way further than talent, because if you have talent but you don't persevere,
that's right,
it doesn't fucking matter. So, Jeff, you teach a class, or at least you used to, I think you still do, at Parsons, right? But it's not about fashion design. It's about all the stuff you're sharing with us right now. I'm super interested in how did that come about, and what do you enjoy about teaching that?
I was approached by a guy. I was shooting the Ralph Lauren show, and I was approached by this guy, Dean Stadel, and it's funny, his first name is Dean, and he's in the academic world. But so that was an initial meeting. I said, I'm Dean Stadel.
My name's Principal.
That's right, yes. And I have no principles. And he said, I teach this course at Parsons, and I would love you to be a guest speaker. And, because, again, it was early in the days of videoing fashion shows, so that was kind of novel at that point. And so I did, and the students liked what I had to say and the way that I said it. And after I had guest lectured for like 5 semesters in a row for him, and there was always good response, he said, look, there's an opening for part-time faculty, and I think you would be great. Are you interested? I'll get you an interview. I said, sure. Yeah. And so I met with, God, I'm blanking on his name. He did the show with Heidi Klum, Project Runway, and he.
Oh.
Yeah,
Tim Gunn.
Tim Gunn, that's right.
Tim
Thank
Gunn.
you. Yeah, and sorry, Tim, if you, in the
Sorry, Tim.
remote chance that you might be listening to this.
We love you, Tim.
And very nice man. And I have this sliver in fashion history of being the last hire he approved before he left Parsons, because his other careers were going quite well.
Well, that's cool.
But he actually said, well, if you could teach a course, what would the course be? And I said, talking about creative careers and how do you make a living with your ideas? I love that. And he hired me. I was approved by him. And it was interesting, because that led to me becoming an adjunct professor. And then I also wrote a book based on the class that I teach that was published a couple of years ago. And it's about what we're talking about, really. And
the book is called Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas, which, you have done.
Well, yeah, I figured, if I'm going to write a book about it, you ought to write about something you know.
Yeah.
But it's also, there's a lot of, information in there from people who, it's all different kinds of careers, and from people that aren't giving you these Pollyanna slogans. It's really good because we talk about the obstacles that they hit. How did they overcome them? What's the emotional content there? Because it's really tough when you put yourself out there, when you put your ideas out there. You also are a target. And, the more public you are, the bigger the target you are for all kinds of things. And I think it's really important that you create an emotional moat, that there's just certain people you don't let cross that, and you realize they don't know you. They may think they know your work, but they don't know you. And these aren't, or shouldn't be, personal attacks if something is criticized. But a lot of people take some pretty bad and traumatic blows as they put themselves out there. And I think that, again, that's where the perseverance comes in. And you have to figure out, wow, why did that knock me on my ass? Was it true? Or,
right.
That kind of thing. How do you overcome that?
Yeah, you have to reflect, right? You have to look back at it and figure out what was there for you. What did you learn from it? How did you grow from it?
Yeah, and by the way, that may take a while for that knowledge to seep in. It's not like an immediate reaction. It takes a while. But we all create our own narratives, and that's always a work in progress. And you can only do that by looking back. And then you sort of knit it together. And, I think that it's interesting, the stories we tell ourselves. And I think the way that you talk to yourself makes a big difference.
So then now coming to today, where you're funneling all of this through now for Personality. So this play that is opening in Chicago, or opened in Chicago, right? And it's about rock and roll. So you're not only are you writing, but you're producing. So and it's theater, and it's about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Explain this combination of everything.
Well, the title of your podcast is what?
Was it chance?
Okay.
Sounds like it might have been. I hear a lot of chance in your story. It's pretty cool, actually.
Well, opportunities are not opportunities if you don't recognize them as such.
Fucking A.
So it's really important to, be awake and understand, what's going on around you, and to be able to sense an opportunity. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm seduced by ideas. So what happened was that I got a call from a guy named John Benani, really good man, who was the executive producer at Radio City Music Hall. And it was their 75th anniversary, and he wanted me to make a film about the 75th anniversary of Radio City. And that became part of the Christmas spectacular. He left Radio City. He gave me a call one day, and he said, where all stories start, in the doctor's office. And he said, I'm here at my eye doctor's. You ever heard of Lloyd Price? And I said, Mr. Personality? Yeah, I love his music. I love Stagger Lee and Personality and Lottie Miss Claudie. I don't know anything about him, but I really loved his music. And he said, well, I'm here with Lloyd. We go to the same eye doctor. And I was telling him about you, talk about chance. I was telling him about you, and we were talking about doing a short documentary about him, and I know you would do a great job. Are you interested? Would you mind meeting with Lloyd? I said, I'd love to meet him. That'd be fun. Cool. So the next day, they came to my office. Lloyd and I hit it off, and I did the documentary. And so I researched him, and then I interviewed him, and it came out quite well. I went with Lloyd and John and a couple of other people to New Orleans. Lloyd is from Kenner, Louisiana, which is where the airport is for New Orleans. Presented the film, and they didn't really have any direction of what they were going to do, but they wanted to raise awareness of Lloyd and that sort of thing, because he's a very interesting person and a very interesting figure in our popular culture. And in getting to know him a bit, I said to Lloyd, I know I can capture your voice. I want to tell your story. And I wrote the first few scenes and read them to him, and he really liked it. And he said, I want you to do this. And that began what became a very, very close friendship. He is a fantastic person. We had a lot of fun together. I mean, going and listening to music with Lloyd Price, being on a conference call with Lloyd and Little Richard. I mean, this is some cool stuff. It was fun.
Yeah.
And Lloyd's story is amazing. As his character says in the play that I wrote, my mama wasn't a whore. My daddy didn't leave us. I didn't learn how to sing in church, and I didn't do drugs. I want to get that out of the way up front. And,
Hell yeah.
you know, it's because we don't all have the same story. So his life unfolded at the crossroads of the youth movement, the civil rights movement, and the birth of rock and roll. All things that mean a lot to me. I love music. I love civil and human rights and stories that bring that to life. And also what Lloyd had to deal with as being a black man, and also being a celebrity, you know, because he would headline at places where he couldn't stay in the hotel where he was booked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And essentially at one point he said, fuck that, I'll open my own club. And he was entrepreneurial. He never allowed himself to be a victim. He would navigate over, under, around, or through those obstacles. And he lived a very full and very interesting life. And, you know, he died in May of 21. And unfortunately, he did see the 29 hour, if you know what that is, which is the first reading where the actors put the script on a music stand. You know, and we had a good cast that did that. And I was able to raise the money to then do a workshop. Then we had our first commercial run in Pennsylvania, actually with a nonprofit. So we didn't produce it, they did. And we're producing the Chicago run, which is our first full-up commercial run. And, you know, when you mentioned, Alan, that I produced it because nobody else would. Most people didn't know who Lloyd Price was. And I had zero reputation in theater as a playwright or anything else. So the only way that I could hope to make this happen was to do it myself. And, you know, and so that's what I did, because I didn't have any, you know, there was no other way it would get done, you know. And when I was first meeting with people, and they'd say, well, blacks don't go to theater. What? And I said, well, by the way, this is current times. This isn't going back to the 50s.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, well, first of all, yes, they do. And second of all, why should they? I don't want to see Carousel. You know, what relates to their lives? That's right, exactly right. But if you put on a play like A Raisin in the Sun, which is back in the 50s, you put on a play like Fences, you put on a play that's relevant to somebody's life, that reflects what their life might be or could be or is, and there's a connection, then they're going to go.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's like hanging out at McDonald's and then somebody saying, well, see, people really rarely eat seafood.
Yeah, that very similar story I just heard, because a friend of mine was working with the Ragtime 25th anniversary concert, the benefit concert that happened a couple months ago, and they were saying, like, yeah, Norm Lewis and these people who originated one of the greatest shows on Broadway, and during their Washington D.C. out of town tryout, they'd go and perform to a sold out house, and then they couldn't get a cab back to their hotel.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
You know, so the story, you know, we were cut short in Pennsylvania because of COVID. We closed a week early. We had a 3.5 week run. The last 8 performances were all sold out. It attracted the most diverse audiences, that theater, People's Light Theater, and they were great partners to work with. It's the most diverse audience that they had ever had. We're seeing that here in Chicago. And, Chicago, I love Chicago. This is by far the most time I've ever spent here. I did a commercial here years ago. But Chicago's a great city. It's a great theater city. Mm-hmm. We've gotten some wonderful publicity here in the Tribune and the Sun-Times, and Chicago Magazine, and it's really great. And this is a big chance. It's both a big chance and a big risk. And I look at things. You had mentioned before about having courage. There's courage and there's confidence. And confidence. It was interesting talking to my friend Dan Sullivan. He said, well, confidence is a capability. Because when we were talking about it and the distinction between the two, confidence comes from repetition. And when you repeat something and you're able to accomplish that, no matter what it is you're learning, you develop that capability, which gives you the confidence that you can pull it off. Courage is stepping off the edge of the cliff. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. That requires courage because you don't know what's going to happen. So, doing this is a combination of the two. It's having a confidence that I can pull it off and attract the right people, because that's critical. You've got to put together the right team of people, and you've got to attract those people, and they have to feel a certain sense of connection to that mission, that it's not just another gig. And that's really important to me, because I'm like all in on this. And when we did the first read through of the script, Sheldon Epps, who's the director, was fantastic. Love working with him. And he said, asked if there were any questions. And one of the actors said, no, I don't have a question, but I have a comment. And that is, I want to say thank you. And he said, at a time when our stories are being pulled off of shelves in libraries and that people aren't hearing them, to tell an authentic story like this, he said, it's an honor to be working on it. And that deeply touched me, because it's a good story and it's true. And what Lloyd had to overcome. And the interesting thing is, like him, he was the first crossover artist, a black man who started attracting substantial numbers of whites to his concerts. And we're doing the same thing in terms of theater, where it's crossed over and it's a very mixed audience, which is fantastic. And so it's been an amazing journey. But doing a play is like any startup. That's the thing that's really important to understand. It's an entrepreneurial venture, and it's a startup. And most startups fail. So, in theater, by the way, it's another trope that theater is a terrible investment. If you look at the numbers, 20% of shows recoup, and less than 10% of businesses do. So if you actually look at the numbers, all those tropes about, how bad an investment it is very high risk, by the way. But all startups are very high risk. And, for me, it's like, well, it's all high risk. What do you really want to be doing? And I love to do.
You're going to take a risk. Do something you love.
Well, that's right. And and if for me, if not now, when? So it's and I kind of looked at things, not just when I got older, but I've always kind of looked at things that way, because I don't want to miss the opportunity because I'm afraid of the risk involved. I have the responsibility as a husband and a father to make sure that my family is provided for. So I can't be stupid and reckless, which is my law firm. by the way, stupid and reckless. But you know, I need to be mindful of those things. But fortunately, I have my wife is very supportive, as are my kids, who aren't really kids anymore. They're 29, and you know, I'll tell you something that deeply touched me. Is before I left, you know, I got to Chicago on April 30th, and today, I don't know when this is going to play out, but today they're recording it on June 12th. And so I have twins, a boy and a girl. And I love when people say, oh, you have twins, a boy and a girl, are they identical?
People just don't pay attention, do they?
You know, there are differences. No, they're not identical. But anyhow, so they came over for brunch. You know, when I was going to be leaving, we got together, and this would probably embarrass them that I'm telling this when I'm telling it. So when they're getting ready to leave, my daughter said, Dad, Jake and I decided we're splitting a unit and we're investing in your play.
Oh.
And you know, I just immediately teared up and hugged them both. I said, thank you, but this is really high risk. And I really love where this is coming from and really appreciate it. But you don't need to do this. And my daughter said, well, Dad, can we lose any more than we're putting in? I said,
Great question.
And I said, no. And she said, I'm okay with that. And then my son said, Dad, this is a full circle moment. And he said, you know, you supported me and Audrey when we were growing up so that we could do what we wanted to do. And now we're in a position to help you. And we want to do that.
That's beautiful.
And yeah, it is. It really is. And those are the real rewards in life, you know, which I think are really important. And those rewards come from really true relationships. And I think that that's also hugely overlooked, because along with perseverance, having the relationships in life are tremendously valuable in so many ways. Do we know where it's going to go from here? No. I feel very good about, I'm very confident about what we're putting in front of the audience. And one of the reasons is, I mean, I'm biased. I think it's a good script, and it's been, you know, I've rewritten and tweaked, and in collaboration with the director Sheldon Epps, and it's been a fantastic collaboration, and with some of the actors too. We have an incredible cast, and it's you find good people through other good people. That's the other important thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's something that I've always been good at doing, is putting together really good teams of people, because there's connection there, you know, and I've done that in whatever business I've had, and that's really, really important, because when you work with good people, so you get to leapfrog over a lot of the initial problems in building a team, and we've got great people, and they were all people who I met through other good people, which is fantastic.
So I mean, you're telling all these success stories, and everything seems to be going well, and the world is coming up roses.
Well, you haven't been listening then, Alan.
Yeah, it goes back to your daughter saying, can I lose more than I've put in? And you can't ever, really. You know?
Well, not really. But what I'm getting at is one of the questions we always love to ask to sort of as we approach the end of the episodes is, like, what is your relationship with failure? How do you deal with rejection and things not going the way you expected and hoped?
Well, So there's a few things. I mean, there's failure in business and there's failure in life. I have failed in business, and I don't think I have failed in life. I have lifelong relationships. I'm very close with my kids. I love my wife, and we've been married over 30 years. So I think that I've done pretty well. Not always. Have I fucked up along the way? Yes. And have I always tried to be better, so to speak? Yes. But I think that the evidence is in the relationships that I've had and maintained throughout my whole life, and the way my kids are in that story that I told you. So there's failure in business, which means you can't, to me, failure is giving up on what's important to you.
Hell yeah.
And that's what failure is. Failure isn't that you lost money, that this thing didn't work out, that whatever. That's not failure. That's hopefully things you learn from and continue to move. And it's only becomes failure when you give up on something that's really important to you because it's just gotten too hard. And putting this together is really fucking hard. But I didn't give up. And I think that's, to me, what failure is. If you compromise your principles, that's failure. If you give up on yourself, that's failure. If you don't continue to pursue what's really important to you, that's failure. And in personal life, failure is not maintaining relationships, not valuing people. And that, to me, is failure in the other part of life. And so it's been a roller coaster ride of a journey, and it still is. And I'm happy, I keep getting told, how amazing it is you made it to this point. And I said, actually, no, because this is just another step in the process. And I want this to have life beyond Chicago, and hopefully with the reviews we get and the ticket sales that it will continue. And it's been an amazing journey, but it's really hard. Yeah. And that's the thing that most people don't talk about, because they somehow think it diminishes things. And I think it makes them real, because when you've achieved, I had a plan and I was able to execute on that plan and I 10x'd my business, I say, shut up. That's just not true, and so I can't agree with you, Alan. It has been, there's been lots of bumps in the road and continue to be, but I'm not giving up.
Well, it's perseverance, what you said earlier. I love that. How can people find you, all the amazing cool shit you're doing, all that good stuff? What's the best way to connect with you?
Well, they can link up with me on LinkedIn. I post quotes of my guests from my class and different stories about business and that sort of thing. So LinkedIn is a good place.
Okay. They
can go to the personalitymusical.com and find out about the play.
Okay.
And they can go to Madoff Productions and see the work that I've done over the years in terms of the fashion and some of the other stuff.
I think you're really cool. And I'm really glad we got to spend this time together. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, my pleasure. I really enjoyed talking with you guys. It was like, having, without the coffee, having a cup of coffee with a couple of friends. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been so awesome.
Yeah, that was our goal. Very good. All right. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right, J-Mads.
I love that. I love that you got scolded at the very opening of this.
I didn't get scolded.
You did. You got scolded. You did.
I didn't get scolded. No. Well, he corrected me, which, too much to my chagrin, I normally ask about pronunciation, but I assumed incorrectly that I knew how to pronounce Madoff, and I did it wrong. So anyway.
Yeah, you did it wrong. That was cute. He obviously has answered that question before. He made off with all of the money.
Right. So J-Mads, our guest, dude, this dude, just incredible. He's just like, yeah, I guess I'm just gonna do this, and then I love his answer at the end about like failure is just giving up on what you want. It's not actually failing by definition.
He was cool. Like, what a mellow dude. Like, very straight face, very straight delivery. Like, really, I wasn't sure what we were gonna get, and man, if you were paying attention, it was like bomb of truth after bomb of truth. Like, it was. I thought that he was a really cool guy.
I really enjoy interviewing people of a certain age who we'll call baby boomers. He called himself a baby boomer. We've interviewed a couple of baby boomers, and the way that they take their analog business acumen and apply it to the current digital age, we're witnessing the results of this transition that I don't think we're going to be able to see again, because now our children did not grow up in analog. They don't understand that. So I think there's a work ethic, and I think there's a focus that you get without the internet in your pocket. Am I making sense?
Yes, I think you're right.
Get off my lawn.
That lived experience. No, I mean, I don't know. Like this, it's just cool. This ability to. I was standing there and I was looking at the boutique and I was like, well, we just make clothes. And then, sure, we can try that. We can do that. Like, obviously embracing chance left and right, but also just this sort of, well, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Right.
I'll try that.
Right.
Whatever. You can't lose more than you put in. Okay.
Yeah, I love that. Like, can we lose more than we are investing? No. Just know what be okay losing what you're putting in. Like, yeah, that's a really, really, really cool philosophy. Anyway.
It was awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, so I'm going to try and go see the show.
Do it.
But everybody else should come to Chicago. You should come to Chicago and see the show. I'm sure it's going to go to Broadway. But, Alan, how can folks connect with us if they like the show, which we're getting some messages, and it's really fun. We love hearing that you guys are digging this. How can they connect with us and all that good stuff?
Send us an email at wasitchancepodcast@gmail.com, and we're on the Igs at wasitchance. That's our username.
You're such a dork.
Slide into the DMs. Send us a screenshot of you listening. We'll repost that. That's fun.
We're really glad you've been here with us and look forward to being with you for so many more episodes. You've been listening to Was It Chance, the podcast about embracing opportunity and taking intentional risk for your creative life. I'm Heather Vickery.
And I'm Alan Seals. Bye. See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Adios. Bye. See ya.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
See ya. Bye. 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 Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.